Hello and welcome back to The Independent Pianists. I'm your host, Cole Anderson, as usual, and today we have something rather different from the usual, a transcription from a film soundtrack. And this film soundtrack is by the composer Devin Anderson Wiley, who just happens to be my brother as well. So indeed, this video is a shameless example of nepotism. I've worked off and on with Devin over the years on many different projects of his. I've worked on some of his film scores in the past, as well as for concert pieces that he's written. And in fact, if you're interested in other music in which I've recorded with him, you can find a playlist. It's going to pop up right about now that includes some of his compositions that I've also been on as a pianist. And if this little piece piques your interest to hear more of Devin's music, he just recently released a studio album called Black Wave Part 1. It's on Spotify and Apple Music and so forth. I'll include links for it in the description box as well. In the words of the composer, it's inspired a little bit by David Bowie's studio album Outside. There's kind of a science fiction story in the background that's kind of providing atmosphere for the music. So there is an overarching theme in this album, and it kind of all ties together, which I find to be really interesting. And I always find Devin's sound world to be quite attractive and imaginative, always finding interesting colors and interesting effects that I've never heard before. So this little clip comes from a film score that Devin did for a 2018 Hong Kong production called The Very Last Day. And actually, you can see this movie online if you want to. It's on tubi.com, tubi.com. Viewer discretion is advised, but it's a fascinating film, very disturbing in some parts. And in my view, the main point of the movie is about memory, the interplay between fiction and reality, as well as trauma and mental illness. And this particular track centers around one of the main characters in the film, the eponymous Melanie. And in fact, this music plays when she is kind of revealing her backstory at a certain point in the film. I don't want to give anything away, but a lot of this has to do with memory, with her recounting memories that she has or claims to have. And I think you'll hear many motives in the music as well, which suggest the elusive qualities of memory. So you'll notice that the accompaniment motive, the fragmentary motive that begins this piece, has kind of a circular, recursive quality, which I think has a lot to do with this theme of the elusive quality of memory. And also some of Devin's influences are probably quite clear when you hear this music, in particular the minimalist composers, perhaps Philip Glass and Michael Nyman most of all. I think another quality of this music which relates to this kind of elusive nature is that the harmonies for each area of the music are never confirmed. We can tell that we're in a certain key. We start out in something like B flat minor and then we switch to C minor, but there's never any kind of a resting point on a defined tonic harmony. Instead, we're kind of passing through these key areas. And as the music progresses, you'll notice that what I've called this kind of accompaniment motive actually becomes kind of a leading melodic motive in itself. So this kind of triplet motive which is going on in the center of the texture is an accompaniment for these kind of free-flowing lines, long-held lines in the strings that appear above and below it. But these lines also, which begin in kind of a downward shape, are echoed by the motive in the center of the texture, the triplet motive. So you can hear how the basic outline of the strong beats in this triplet motive is basically a diminution of the longer lines in the outer voices. So when making this arrangement for the piano, I was faced with several problems. Obviously, the register of the original orchestral parts are very difficult to approximate sometimes because it requires such a wide range in certain sections. In certain places, I even went so far as to do very slight recompositions, some kind of alternative melodic shapings in some parts to fit all of the music within the piano's range and accommodate two hands. This was with the composer's permission, and I like to think that these places are just alternatives that could have been arrived at if the composer was originally trying to write this for the piano by itself. I think the overall mood is not necessarily harmed by these slight changes. So you'll notice that if you compare it to the original in places like this, So I've already mentioned where you can see the film online, and you can also find the soundtrack for this film, as well as Devon's other music on Spotify, Apple Music, or any other streaming service. Quite apart from its relationship to the film, the music by itself is very fascinating and beautiful, and you might have even noticed if you tuned in for any of my recent live performances that I had played this as kind of a prelude to the rest of the concert. Although it certainly has some very challenging sections where you have to kind of leap around the piano a little bit. Actually, once you've learned it, this music is not so difficult to master, and it's very beautiful and effective. So for the kind of late intermediate pianist, you might find this to be a very enjoyable piece to work on. So if you would like to get a copy of the sheet music, just contact me. I do have it for sale, but I'm not actually doing it through my website because I want to be able to funnel any proceeds from selling the music back to the composer more easily. So stay tuned for a complete performance of Melanie from The Very Last Day by Devon Anderson Wiley in my own transcription. And be sure to stay tuned next week. I'll have some more great music for you. Take care.